Ugh. Hello and welcome to the Literary Lair. I don't remember why I knocked myself unconscious with a trombone mouthpiece, but I'm sure whatever's in my other hand will explain that. That'll do it! Well, that time of year again, where I like to torture myself with a bad book. This one got a 1 from StarTrek.com. But I mean, it can't be all bad. I mean, I probably didn't even see the good parts when I first read it. I'll open it up to prove it. Nope. Iota, what are the odds that I'll make it through this review?
There is a 70% chance of you retaining your sanity.
Damn. Well, let's take a look. Not before Dishonor. The cover is, again, normal for Star Trek books. Bland as hell. It's a navy-tinted board cube with a semi-transparent navy-tinted 7 of 9 in front of it. However, this is labeled as a TNG book, so why 7? Right, never put the logic into the bad books. This was written by Peter David, who wrote 2 of my favorite Star Trek books ever, The Rift and Q Squared. So maybe I just let the rating get in front of liking it. Let's go to the story proper. The story opens on a science vessel with Admiral Janeway. I say that because how did they promote her after she stranded her crew in the Delta Quadrant? Calm down. It'll get better. I hope. Janeway is on a science vessel that's going toward a board cube that was pronounced dead. She goes to her quarters to find James T. Kirk waiting for her. No! 4 pages in. Quit while you're ahead, dammit. No Kirk with Janeway stories. Looks like the book heard me because it turns out to be Q. No, not that Q. Not that one either. Or that one. Not even that one. Yep, that's the one. Q's wife. I can already see that this story is doomed from the start. We don't even get a good Q. I would have settled for the Q from Deja Q. He only had less than 10 lines in the entire episode. Whatever. Lady Q's telling Janeway not to go on the cube, which of course Janeway thinks she knows better than everyone, so she goes and does it anyway. Which leads to her and her entire array team getting assimilated. Let's count it. 2 chapters. 38 pages into the book, and Janeway has already put herself and her crew in harm's way. Who made her an admiral, and what the fuck were they smoking? I personally go with SF Debris' explanation, because that's as good as any. And I'm pissed at Lady Q, because she didn't save Janeway. Lady, you are a god! You are allowed to play god! Then we get to 7 of 9, who's a professor at Starfleet Academy. She senses the board's assimilation of Janeway and goes to Jellicoe to allow her to investigate what happened. Jellicoe calls the science vessel, and it turns out that Janeway and Borg assimilated the entire crew, and they told Jellicoe that everything was A-OK. And he believed them. 7, however, doesn't, making her the most competent person in this book as of yet. She finds a cargo ship willing to take her to Vulcan, and they set off, getting chased by the USS Thunderchild, but evading them. Meanwhile, we get to check in on Picard. In a book that was labeled Star Trek The Next Generation, we don't see anything related to the Next Generation until Chapter 6. Where we see that they're dedicating a school of diplomacy to Sarek. My question is, why did it take so long to dedicate something to him? He was a great ambassador, and he died in 2368, which was before DS9 or Voyager existed. And this takes place definitely after Nemesis, because Riker commands the Titan. This is at least 11 years after Sarek died, and they just now dedicate something to him. Well, Perrin, Sarek's second wife, is there, and her Argelian friend comes up to Picard and points at him and says, "Doom." He's disturbed by that, and rightfully so. The book takes this time to tell us about the new counselor, who is Vulcan and sort of a bitch. But I will go into that later, and you better believe we will go into that. Picard sticks around until nightfall and runs into Spock, who showed up after the festivities ended. They talk about Sarek, and Picard invites Spock up to the Enterprise. Lady Q returns to the cube long enough for Janeway aboard to berate Lady Q for not saving Janeway and reveal her evil plan of reassimilating Seven and Picard, which I assume is the only reason this gets the label of Next Generation. Beverly Crusher laughs at what the Argelian did, making Picard a bit angry, and he makes a joke at her expense, which leads to her withholding sex. We meet the Vulcan counselor, and she's angry that Picard doesn't listen to her suggestions. I want to know how a Vulcan became a counselor. To be one, you need to be able to understand emotions of various species. And that was the only thing Troy was good at. Spock shows up in the Happy Bottom Riders Club, or as I like to call it, 10 Forward 2, Electric Boogaloo. He talks with T'Lana, the counselor, and he actually makes a joke. When she asks why he was there, he replies with, "I was thirsty." I think that was the funniest line in the entire book. From a Vulcan. So they talk about how Kirk always did rash stuff and never listened to Spock. The difference was that Kirk took Spock's suggestions into consideration, but Kirk was the captain and his decisions were usually the right decision, which is why Kirk was the greatest Starfleet captain ever. Also, Spock tended to only disagree with Kirk if he had a better idea. They were usually going for the same goal, but Spock's would usually use logic, where Kirk's was using common sense. So, I don't know really what T'Lana's talking about. Seven arrives, and the captain of the cargo ship, Grim Vargo, leaves, but he gets captured by Starfleet. Perrin and Picard talk some more, and Perrin returns home, finding out that her Argelian friend was not able to make it to Vulcan. So who was that told Picard? Doom. Jellicoe tells Picard that Seven is nuts, and they should bring her back to Seven Earth. Picard agrees, and he has a conference with his senior crew. Dr. Crusher, Geordi, Worf, Miranda Kadohata, T'Lana, and Zelek Lebenzon. Lebenzon's a bit of a prick and goes by the books, which is not something that I like, and Kadohata is, at least in this book, a slave to orders, and listens to Lebenzon too much. So Picard wants to listen to Seven because, you know, the Locutus thing. So Picard calls the bridge and tells the con officer, Lieutenant Stevens, a transfer from Mackenzie Calhoun's ship. Calhoun's from the New Frontier novels that I've heard are really good, but I've actually never read them. Stevens is also our comic relief character, having a conversation about when Picard says set a course from home. Did he mean Earth or Stevens' home, which is a Mars colony? I admit I do like Stevens, if only at his confusion at the simplest commands. So what do they do next? They have Spock mind meld with Seven, of course. Why? Because T'Lana didn't want to do it. Like usual for Star Trek, it goes wrong and they realize the Borg mean business. The Borg set a course for Earth, which is very, very bad. Also, Grim Vargo gets captured by the Starfleet ship he evaded earlier, and plays dumb about knowing where Seven was, and then the unthinkable happens. The Borg attack, and while Vargo escapes, the Thunderchild is absorbed by the cube, and becomes one with it. The transmission is sent to the Enterprise that makes Picard worry about heading back to Earth, because, you know, it's them against missing No. Picard calls the meeting and tells the senior crew that they aren't heading back to Earth. Lebenzon acts like a douche and doesn't listen to reason, and Picard reveals the master plan. Go to the planet that's housing the Doomsday Machine from the TOS episode of the same name, and use that to take on the Borg, since it's the only thing in the universe that can stop it. T'Lana, wait, no, I'm not calling her that. She is now pointy-eared bitch. She talks back to Spock by saying that it was his fault for melding with Seven and that the Earth is doomed. Listen, pointy-eared bitch. No, it freaking isn't. Janeway's the Borg Queen. She knows that if you want Picard and Seven, you have to hold Earth hostage. This is no one's fault. Stop assigning blame where it isn't needed. Sorry about that. What was I talking about again? Oh, right. Geordi points out that they are under orders, but because they know Seven isn't as mad as a man in a blue box, that they should go to the Doomsday Machine. Pointy-eared Bick shows up at Spock's room and wants to apologize to him, and she has trouble saying sorry. No, I'm done with her. She can't possibly get worse than not being able to apologize for snapping at the Vulcan who sacrificed his damn life to save the Federation. If he says something can help save Earth, he is right. They also have a little reference to the late Majel Barrett, where Geordi, looking for the stuff about the virus they were going to infect Hugh with, thinks to himself that the computer's voice reminding of Laxwana Chore. Crusher wakes up in the middle of the night and finds out Picard isn't in bed next to her. He's sitting on a chair watching her. Picard laments that he has to admit that he shouldn't just disobey direct orders, but Crusher tells him that they have to account for common sense, and he agrees and they go back to bed. The cube continues to absorb stuff on its way back to Earth. The crew watches the footage of more ships getting absorbed, and Picard decides that they are definitely going to get the Doomsday Machine. Pointy-eared Bix talks to Spock again, and he tells her that Picard changed course and she's not happy. She then tries to chew Picard out, but screw that, Picard's right, moving on. In the bunker, a safe haven that is indestructible and underground on Earth, Admirals Jellicoe and Nechayev are talking about how they can't do anything, because being admirals, they're forced to stay in the safe house. They talk about how the cube is on a collision course to the 9th planet, Pluto. And yes, in the time of where the admirals are, Pluto's a planet again. Jellicoe and Nechayev have a amusing argument about how the status has changed 10 times in the past 300 years. And then the cube absorbed Pluto and grew to a massive size. Then Picard and Geordi talk about Project Endgame, the Hugh virus, and then Jellicoe and Nechayev tell Picard that he has to go to Earth, despite that basically being suicide. Nice to see that we have rational people in high positions of power at Starfleet. Tell me why they demoted Kirk again. So they decide to give command to Worf, who refuses because his foot is asleep. And Geordi, but his ocular implants are acting up. Command is eventually given to Katahada. The Borg cut the transmission, and Seven and Geordi talk about the Borg. Then Katahada and Lebenzin plan a mutiny against Picard. Steven listens in and laments that it was inevitable, which makes you wonder, who is he? Janeway sends a few ships to follow Picard, and Grim Vargo decides to spy on the Borg. Jellicoe and Nechayev watch on in horror as the Borg absorb some of the sun and grow to even bigger size. Vargo was shocked too. The mutiny happens in full swing, and Picard, Geordi, Spock, Seven, Worf, and Crusher are taken into custody. Worf attacks Lebenzon, and then Pointy-eared Bix Vulcan nerve pinches him. However, Spock, in another homage to TOS, lock the controls like he did in the Menagerie, and they are still heading to the Doomsday Machine. Katahada assumes command, but at that point, it was pointless because there's no way to change their heading. Jellicoe watches as an ambassador tries to reason with the Borg, but his, ship gets blown up. And you know what? No! No, I can't take this anymore. You know what? Review over. This book sucks. So they decide to give command to Worf, who refuses because his foot is asleep. And Geordi because his ocular implants are acting up. They're really not, but... Let's try that again.